The phone rang at 6:47 a.m., and I knew before I even looked at the caller ID that it was going to be another one of those calls. The robotic voice on the other end launched into the same script I'd heard 37 times in the past 2 weeks. This is regarding your veteran benefits eligibility. Press 1 to speak with a representative about your unclaimed compensation. I hung up and stared at my coffee mug, the steam rising like smoke signals from a battlefield I couldn't see. At 52, I'd survived 2 tours in Afghanistan, a divorce that nearly broke me, and raising my son Tyler alone for the past 8 years. But these calls were driving me to the edge of something I didn't recognize in myself. The worst part wasn't the harassment, it was the specificity. They knew I was a veteran. They knew my rank. They even knew about the hearing damage in my left ear from an IED blast outside Kandahar. Information that specific doesn't just float around in some database. Someone who knew me had sold them my story. Tyler shuffled into the kitchen, all 6 feet of him moving like he was underwater. At 19, he had my height, but none of my military bearing. His hair hung in his eyes, and he wore the same Black Sabbath t-shirt he'd been sleeping in for 3 days. The kid was supposed to be starting community college in the fall, but so far his main accomplishment this summer had been perfecting his impression of a houseplant. "Morning, Dad." He grabbed an energy drink from the fridge and popped it open. The sound made me wince, too much like the crack of gunfire. "You're up early," I said, checking my watch. Tyler usually didn't surface until noon. Couldn't sleep. He wouldn't meet my eyes, that phone ringing and all. I studied his face, looking for tells the way I'd learned terrain in hostile territory. There was something there, guilt, maybe, or fear. The same look he'd worn when he was 12 and I'd caught him stealing from my wallet. "Tyler," I kept my voice level. "We need to talk about something." "About what?" "These calls I've been getting. About veteran benefits. Someone's been giving out my personal information." The energy drink slipped from his hand and hit the floor, spraying liquid across the linoleum. Tyler just stood there, staring at the mess like it was a crime scene. "Shit. Sorry, Dad. I'll clean it up." But he didn't move. He just stood there with his shoulders hunched, looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "Tyler." My voice came out harder than I intended. "Look at me." When he finally raised his head, I saw the truth written all over his face. The guilt was so thick I could practically taste it in the air between us. "How much did they pay you?" The question hung in the kitchen like a grenade with the pin pulled. Tyler's face went white, then red, then white again. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Dad, How much?" $500. The words came out in a whisper. "They said it was just for a survey, about veteran families. They said they were helping people get benefits they deserved." I felt something cold settle in my chest. $500? My son had sold me out for $500? I'd been willing to die for this country, and my own kid had handed my information to scammers for less than what I spent on groceries in a month? "Sit down," I said. Tyler collapsed into a chair like someone had cut his strings. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too bright, too full of the smell of spilled energy drink and broken trust. "Tell me everything." The story came out in fits and starts. Tyler had been playing some online game, something with dragons and magic that I'd never understood. He'd been messaging with other players, and one of them had reached out about a side opportunity. They said they worked for a marketing company that did surveys about veteran families. Tyler had to do was provide some basic information about his father's military service, and they'd pay him $500. "They said it was completely legal," Tyler insisted, his voice getting higher with desperation. "They said they were helping veterans get benefits the government owed them. They made it sound like I was doing you a favor." I closed my eyes and counted to 10 in Arabic, then in Pashto, then in English. It was a technique I'd learned in anger management therapy after the divorce. Linda had insisted on it after I'd put my fist through the bathroom door during one of our fights. What exactly did you tell them? Tyler looked like he might throw up. Your name, rank, service dates, the stuff about your hearing, the VA rating for your PTSD. He paused. And your phone number. Each piece of information hit me like a separate punch to the gut. My PTSD rating wasn't something I talked about, even with family. The fact that Tyler knew about it meant he'd been going through my paperwork, probably while I was at work. Where did you find that information? Your desk. In the file folder marked VA. I wasn't snooping, I swear. I was looking for my birth certificate for the college application, and I saw the papers. I remembered that day. Tyler had asked about his birth certificate, and I'd told him to check my desk. I'd been rushing to work and hadn't thought about what else might be in that folder. My disability rating, my medical records, my entire military history laid out in black and white. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent years trying to protect Tyler from the uglier parts of my service, from the nightmares and the hypervigilance, and the way certain sounds could send me straight back to a dusty road outside Kandahar. But all my secrets had been sitting right there in a manila folder, waiting for him to find them. They contacted you through the game? Tyler nodded miserably. This guy said his username was VetHelper2023. He seemed really knowledgeable about military stuff. He knew about different benefits programs, stuff I'd never heard of. He said his dad was a veteran too. Of course they'd targeted him through the game. Predators always found the easiest way in, and Tyler's gaming addiction had made him vulnerable. I'd been after him for months to spend less time online, to get a job, to do something productive with his life. Now I wondered if those conversations had driven him towards someone who seemed to offer an easy solution to his money problems. How did they pay you? Gift cards, Amazon and Google Play. They said it was easier for tax purposes. Gift cards, untraceable, non-refundable, the currency of choice for scammers worldwide. I'd seen enough fraud prevention training during my years as a bank security guard to know that legitimate companies didn't pay people in gift cards. When did this happen? 2 weeks ago. The timeline matched perfectly. The calls had started exactly 14 days ago, right after Tyler had apparently handed over my entire life story to criminals. I got up from the table and walked to the window. Our backyard looked the same as always. Overgrown grass, a rusty swing set from Tyler's childhood, the fence that needed repair. But something fundamental had shifted. The safe space I'd tried to build for my son and myself had been compromised from the inside. Dad? Tyler's voice was small behind me. I'm really sorry. I know I screwed up. I turned around and looked at him. Really looked at him. When had he gotten so thin? When those dark circles appeared under his eyes? I'd been so focused on my own struggles, the job I hated, the bills that never seemed to get smaller, the loneliness that settled over the house like dust, that I'd missed the signs that my son was struggling too. Why did you need the money? Tyler's face crumpled. I owe someone. Who? This guy Marcus, from school. I bought some stuff from him, and I was supposed to pay him back, but I couldn't find a job, and he was getting really pissed. The pieces started falling into place. The nervousness, the sleepless nights, the way Tyler had been jumping every time his phone buzzed. He wasn't just dealing with guilt about selling my information. He was scared. What kind of stuff? Tyler looked away. Just some pills, Adderall, to help me focus on college applications. Adderall? Study drugs? Half the kids his age were popping them like candy, convinced they needed chemical enhancement to compete in a world that kept demanding more and more from young people. But Adderall was expensive when you bought it on the street, and Tyler had no income. How much do you owe him? $800. More than he'd made from selling my information, which meant he was still in the hole, still in danger, and now we were both dealing with the consequences of his desperation. The phone rang again. Same number as before, same robotic voice. This time I let it go to voicemail, but I could see Tyler flinch with each ring. He knew what those calls meant. He knew what he'd done to me. "We're gonna fix this," I said. Tyler looked up at me with something that might have been hope. "How?" "First, you're going to give me every detail you can remember about this Vet Helper 2023. Every conversation, every email, every piece of information they asked for. Then we're going to trace these calls and find out who's behind them." "You can do that?" I almost smiled. Tyler had no idea what his old man was capable of when properly motivated. 20 years in the Army had taught me a few things about tracking enemies, and 10 years working bank security had shown me how scammers operated. I might not be the computer-savvy teenager I'd once been, but I had resources and experience that these criminals probably hadn't counted on. "Yeah, son, I can do that." The first step was gathering intelligence. I had Tyler write down everything he could remember about his contact with Vet Helper 2023. The username, the gaming platform, the timing of their conversations, even the specific language the scammer had used. The more I learned, the angrier I got, but I kept my voice calm and professional. This was a mission now, and missions required clear thinking. The scammer had been clever. They'd approached Tyler gradually, first as a fellow gamer, then as someone with shared experiences through their veteran father. They'd built trust before making their pitch, and they'd framed the whole thing as helping veterans rather than exploiting them. It was textbook social engineering, the kind of manipulation that worked because it appealed to the target's better instincts. While Tyler was writing, I pulled up the call logs on my phone. 37 calls in 14 days, all from different numbers, but clearly part of the same operation. I screenshot each one and noted the times and dates. Then I started doing reverse lookups on the phone numbers. Most of them came back as VoIP numbers, internet-based phone services that were cheap to set up and easy to abandon. But a few were registered to actual companies, fly-by-night operations with names like American Benefit Solutions and Veteran Assistance Network. I wrote down every address, every registration detail, every piece of information I could find. "Dad," Tyler looked up from his writing, "what are you going to do with all this?" "I'm going to find them," I said, "and then I'm going to make sure they can't do this to anyone else." The next few hours were like being back in intelligence analysis, except instead of tracking insurgents in Afghanistan, I was hunting scammers in America. I called each of the numbers that had harassed me, not to complain, but to gather information. I pretended to be interested in their services, asked detailed questions about their company, their location, their process. Most of the operators were clearly reading from scripts, but I managed to extract a few useful details. One of them mentioned they were based in Florida. Another let slip that they were part of a network of veteran service providers. A third one, clearly frustrated with my questions, told me I could find more information on their website before hanging up on me. The website was amateur hour. Stock photos of smiling veterans, testimonials that were obviously fake, and contact information that led nowhere. But the domain registration told a different story. It was registered to a company called Patriot Marketing Solutions with an address in Tampa. I called the Tampa address. It was a mailbox service. But mailbox services kept records, and companies that registered domains had to provide contact information, even if it was fake. Every thread I pulled revealed two more, and slowly a picture started to emerge. Tyler had been watching me work for hours, his notebook forgotten on the table. "This is like watching CSI or something," he said. 20 years in the Army teaches you how to gather intelligence," I said, still typing. "And 10 years in bank security teaches you how scammers think." "I had no idea you knew how to do all this computer stuff." I looked at him over my laptop screen. "There's a lot you don't know about me, son." It was true. Tyler knew me as his dad, the guy who made pancakes on Sunday mornings and helped him with his homework and drove him to doctor's appointments. He didn't know about the man who'd interrogated Taliban fighters, who'd tracked weapons smugglers through the mountains of Afghanistan, who'd learned to read people like books and spot deception from a mile away. Maybe that was part of the problem. I'd been so focused on being a good father that I'd forgotten to show Tyler who I really was. He saw me as someone to be protected and managed, not as someone who might actually be able to help him when things went wrong. By evening, I had a clearer picture of the operation. It was bigger than I'd initially thought, not just a couple of guys in a basement, but a sophisticated network that targeted veterans and their families across multiple states. They used gaming platforms and social media to identify vulnerable targets, then employed young people like Tyler to harvest personal information from their veteran family members. The beauty of the scheme was its deniability. If anyone got caught, it would be kids like Tyler, not the people running the show. The masterminds stayed hidden behind layers of fake companies and intermediaries, while teenagers faced the consequences of what they'd been told was just a survey. "Dad," Tyler said quietly, "what's going to happen to me?" I closed my laptop and looked at him. He'd been sitting at that kitchen table for 6 hours, watching me work, and the fear in his eyes had only gotten worse as the scope of what he'd gotten involved in became clear. "That depends," I said. "On what?" "On whether you're willing to help me stop them." Tyler straightened up in his chair. For the first time all day, he looked like the young man I'd raised instead of the scared kid who'd spilled energy drink on my floor that morning. "What do you need me to do?" The plan was simple in concept but risky in execution. Tyler would re-establish contact with Vet Helper 2023, claiming he had access to information from other veteran families. He'd string them along, gathering more details about their operation, while I worked the other angles, reporting them to the authorities, tracing their financial networks, and building a case that could shut them down. "This is dangerous," I warned Tyler. "These people are criminals. If they figure out what we're doing, there could be consequences." Tyler nodded seriously. "I understand, but I want to make this right." "It's not just about making it right anymore," I said. "It's about making sure they don't do this to other families." The next morning, Tyler logged into his gaming account and sent a message to Vet Helper 2023. The response came back within an hour. They were very interested in expanding their survey program and were willing to pay even more for additional veteran information. While Tyler was playing his role as the eager accomplice, I was building relationships with the real authorities. I called the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, the Federal Trade Commission, and the VA's fraud hotline. Each agency had procedures and requirements, but I dealt with military bureaucracy for 20 years. I knew how to work the system. The breakthrough came on the 3rd day of our operation. Tyler had been chatting with his handler about potentially recruiting other military families when the scammer let slip a crucial detail. They were planning to attend a veteran job fair in Orlando the following week, looking for new targets. That gave us a location and a timeline. More importantly, it gave us an opportunity. I called my contact at the FBI, a patient agent named Sarah Martinez, who'd been taking my calls for the past few days. When I told her about the job fair lead, her tone changed completely. "Mr. Williams, this is the first solid intelligence we've had on this operation. They've been targeting veterans across 6 states, and we've been trying to track them for months. What do you need from us? Keep doing exactly what you're doing. Don't let them know you're onto them, and be very, very careful." The warning wasn't necessary. I'd already decided that Tyler wouldn't be anywhere near Orlando when the FBI made their move. Whatever happened at that job fair, my son would be safely out of the picture. But Tyler had other ideas. "I want to go with you," he said when I explained the plan. "Absolutely not. Dad, I'm the one they're expecting to communicate with. If something goes wrong, if they get suspicious, you'll need me there. Tyler, these are federal criminals. This isn't a game." "I know it's not a game." His voice cracked with frustration. "Don't you think I know that? I'm the one who got us into this mess. I should be the one to help get us out." I looked at my son, really looked at him. Somewhere in the past week, something had changed. The slouching teenager who'd been drifting through life had been replaced by someone who stood straighter, spoke more clearly, and met my eyes when he talked. The consequences of his actions had forced him to grow up in ways that months of my lectures never could have. "This isn't about proving yourself," I said. "Yes, it is," Tyler replied. "It's about proving myself to you and to me and to everyone whose information I helped steal. I need to do this, Dad." I studied his face, looking for the tells that would indicate he was just being impulsive or trying to play the hero. But what I saw was determination, mixed with a mature understanding of the risks involved. "If we do this together," I said slowly, "you follow my lead. No improvisation, no freelancing, no trying to be clever. We stick to the plan, and if I tell you to walk away, you walk away. Understood?" Tyler nodded. "Understood." The Orlando Veterans Job Fair was held at a convention center downtown, and it was exactly the kind of event that would attract the people we were looking for. Hundreds of veterans and their families, all gathered in one place, many of them struggling with employment or financial issues. It was a target-rich environment for scammers who knew how to exploit desperation. Tyler and I drove down the night before and stayed in a cheap motel near the convention center. I'd been to Orlando a dozen times with Tyler when he was younger. Disney World, Universal Studios, all the tourist traps that fathers take their kids to. But this trip felt different. We weren't here as a family on vacation. We were here as a team on a mission. The FBI had given us specific instructions. Agent Martinez and her team would be working undercover at the job fair, posing as veterans and employers. Our job was to make contact with Vet Helper 2023's representatives and keep them engaged until the agents could identify and apprehend them. "Remember," I told Tyler as we got ready that morning, "these people are professionals. They're going to be looking for signs that something is wrong. Stay calm, stick to your story, and trust me to handle anything unexpected." Tyler was wearing a button-down shirt and khakis, the most professional outfit he owned. He looked young and nervous, which was perfect for his role as a college student looking to make some easy money. What if they ask questions I can't answer? Refer them to me. I'm your source, remember? They'll expect me to be protective of my information. The job fair was crowded and chaotic, exactly what we'd hoped for. Tyler and I split up, with him working the main floor while I positioned myself near the entrance where I could watch for suspicious activity. It didn't take long to spot them. Two men in cheap suits, too young to be veterans themselves, working their way through the crowd with practiced efficiency. They weren't there looking for jobs. They were there looking for targets. I watched them approach several older veterans, engaging them in conversations that looked casual but followed a clear pattern. Tyler spotted them too. I saw him position himself in their path, pretending to read literature from one of the employer booths. When they approached him, he played his part perfectly, eager, slightly naive, and very interested in making some quick money. I couldn't hear the conversation from where I was standing, but I could see Tyler nodding and asking questions. After about 10 minutes, one of the men handed him a business card, and they moved on to their next target. Tyler made his way over to me, trying to look casual. "They want to meet tonight," he said quietly, "at a restaurant near our motel. They said they have a bigger opportunity than what we discussed online." My blood went cold. Meeting in person meant they were either planning to recruit Tyler more heavily into their operation, or they suspected something and wanted to interrogate him face to face. Either way, it was dangerous. "We stick to the plan," I said. "You wear a wire, I stay close, and Agent Martinez has backup ready." But that evening, as we sat in the restaurant waiting for the meet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The two men arrived exactly on time, but they weren't alone. A third man, older and more professionally dressed, had joined them. He had the kind of presence that came from being in charge, and the way the other two deferred to him made it clear that he was running the show. "Tyler?" The older man slid into the booth across from us. "I'm David. We've been very impressed with your work." Tyler played his part, thanking them for the opportunity and expressing enthusiasm for doing more. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the slight tremor in his hands when he reached for his water glass. He was scared, and I was proud of him for not showing it. "We understand you might have access to more veteran families," David continued, "perhaps through your father's contacts." It was a test. They wanted to see how much Tyler was willing to exploit his relationship with me, and how much access he really had to other potential targets. "My dad knows a lot of guys from his unit," Tyler said carefully, "but he's pretty private about that stuff. It would take some time to get information from him." David smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, we understand the need for discretion. Perhaps you could introduce us to your father directly? We'd be happy to explain our program to him." This was the moment I'd been dreading. They wanted to meet me, which meant they were either planning to recruit me or they suspected that Tyler wasn't operating alone. Either way, it moved us into uncharted territory. I made the decision in that instant. "I'm Tyler's father," I said, sliding into the booth next to my son. "And I think we need to have a different kind of conversation." The temperature in the restaurant seemed to drop 10 degrees. David's expression didn't change, but I saw his eyes flick to the exits, calculating distances and options. The two younger men shifted in their seats, suddenly alert. "Mr. Williams," David said smoothly, "what a pleasant surprise. Tyler didn't mention you'd be joining us." "Tyler doesn't know everything I do," I replied, "just like you don't know everything about me." I let that hang in the air for a moment, watching their reactions. David was good. His face revealed nothing, but the other two were amateurs, and I could see the concern in their eyes. "Mr. Williams," David said smoothly, "what a pleasant surprise. Tyler didn't mention you'd be joining us." "Tyler doesn't know everything I do," I replied, "just like you don't know everything about me." I let that hang in the air for a moment, watching their reactions. David was good. His face revealed nothing, but the other two were amateurs, and I could see the concern in their eyes. "I know you've been calling me 37 times in 2 weeks," I continued. "I know you're running a scam that targets veterans and their families. And I know that you made the mistake of involving my son." David leaned back in the booth, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp. "Those are serious accusations, Mr. Williams. I hope you have some proof to back them up." I smiled and pulled out my phone. "Agent Martinez, they're all here." The next few minutes were a blur of activity. FBI agents seemed to materialize from every corner of the restaurant. They'd been positioned as diners, waitstaff, even the guy reading a newspaper at the bar. David and his associates were surrounded before they could even think about running. Tyler sat frozen next to me, watching the arrests with wide eyes. "Is it over?" he asked, quietly. "The arrests are just the beginning," I said. "These guys are part of a bigger network. But we've given the FBI enough information to start rolling up the whole operation." Agent Martinez approached our table after David and his team had been taken away. "Excellent work, both of you," she said. "The information you provided led us to arrest coordinators in 3 other states tonight." "What happens now?" Tyler asked. "Now you go home and try to put this behind you," Martinez replied. "You've done your country a service." On the drive back to Tampa, Tyler was quiet for the first hour. I let him process what had happened, knowing that he needed time to understand the magnitude of what we'd accomplished together. "Dad," he finally said as we crossed the state line, "I'm sorry I let you down." I glanced over at him. "You didn't let me down, son. I sold your information to criminals. I put you in danger. You made a mistake," I interrupted. "A big one. But when you realized what you'd done, you stepped up and helped fix it. That's what matters." Tyler was quiet for another few miles. "I was scared," he admitted. "About the money I owed, about college, about everything. I felt like I was drowning, and when that guy offered me an easy solution, I grabbed it without thinking." "Being scared doesn't make you weak," I said. It makes you human. The question is what you do with that fear. What do you mean? I thought about my own fears, the nightmares that still woke me up sometimes, the way certain sounds could transport me back to Afghanistan, the crushing loneliness that had settled over me since Linda left. I'd spent years trying to hide those fears from Tyler, thinking I was protecting him. But maybe what he'd needed wasn't protection. Maybe he'd needed to see that even strong people struggle sometimes. Fear can paralyze you, or it can motivate you, I said. The choice is yours. When we got home, the house felt different. Not because anything had physically changed, but because something fundamental had shifted between Tyler and me. We'd been through something together, faced real danger as a team, and emerged stronger on the other side. Tyler went to his room to pack for college. He'd decided to start classes in the spring semester instead of waiting another year. The experience had given him a sense of purpose and urgency that all my lectures never could have provided. I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee, looking at the phone that had been my tormentor for 3 weeks. It hadn't rung once since we'd gotten back from Orlando. The scammers were gone, their operation dismantled, their ability to hurt other families eliminated. But more important than stopping the scammers was what Tyler and I had discovered about each other. He'd learned that his father was more capable and resourceful than he'd ever imagined. And I'd learned that my son had the courage and integrity to make things right when he'd made a mistake. The next morning, Tyler came into the kitchen while I was making breakfast. He was carrying a cardboard box filled with all his gaming equipment: console, controllers, headset, the works. "What's all this?" I asked. "I'm getting rid of it," he said. "I'm done hiding in games. I want to focus on real life." I looked at the box, then at my son's face. "Tyler, you don't have to give up gaming entirely. It's okay to have hobbies." "I know," he said, "but I need to prove to myself that I can function without it, at least for a while." I nodded, understanding the impulse. Sometimes you had to go to extremes to find your balance. "What are you going to do with your time instead?" Tyler smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in months. "I was thinking about getting a job, maybe at the VA hospital. They have a volunteer program for families of veterans." The irony was perfect. The son who'd been exploited because of his father's military service now wanted to help other veteran families. He'd found a way to transform his mistake into something positive. "I think that's a great idea," I said. Over the following weeks, Tyler threw himself into his volunteer work with the same intensity he'd once devoted to his games. He helped elderly veterans navigate the bureaucracy of their benefits claims, drove disabled vets to medical appointments, and assisted families who were struggling with the same issues we'd faced. And slowly, I started opening up to him about my own experiences. Not the classified details of my military service, but the emotional reality of what it had been like to serve, to come home, to try to build a normal life after experiencing things that most people couldn't imagine. Tyler listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions and offering insights that surprised me with their maturity. The scared teenager who'd sold my information to scammers had evolved into a young man who understood complexity and consequence in ways that went far beyond his years. One evening, about 6 weeks after Orlando, Tyler came home from the VA hospital with news. "Dad, you need to meet someone," he said. "There's this guy, Jim, who's been trying to get his disability rating increased for 3 years. The bureaucracy keeps losing his paperwork and he's about to give up, but I think you could help him." "How?" "You know how to work the system. You know who to call, how to cut through the red tape. And after what we went through with the scammer investigation, you've got contacts at the FBI and other agencies. You could make a real difference." I thought about it. I'd spent 10 years working bank security, a job that paid the bills but didn't give me much sense of purpose. And before that, 20 years in the Army, serving something bigger than myself. Maybe it was time to find a way to serve again. What are you thinking? Tyler's eyes lit up. I'm thinking we could start something, like a consulting service for veterans who are having trouble with their benefits. You've got the knowledge and the contacts. I've got the energy and the time. We could be a team." The idea had merit. There were thousands of veterans who got lost in the bureaucratic maze of the VA system, who gave up on benefits they'd earned because they didn't know how to navigate the process. And there were plenty of scammers, like the ones we'd caught, preying on that frustration and desperation. "It would be a lot of work," I said, "and we probably wouldn't make much money, at least not at first." "I don't care about the money," Tyler said. "I care about doing something that matters." I looked at my son, this young man who'd grown up so much in just a few weeks, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Pride, yes, but also hope. Hope that we could build something together, something that would help other families avoid the kind of crisis we'd faced. "All right," I said, "let's do it." We spent the next month planning our new venture. Tyler handled the research and administrative work, while I reached out to my contacts in the veteran community and government agencies. We developed a simple business model. We'd charge a modest fee to help veterans navigate the benefit system, and we'd do it all completely above board, with full transparency and accountability. Our first client was Jim, the veteran Tyler had met at the VA hospital. His case was exactly the kind of bureaucratic nightmare that drove people to desperation. 3 years of lost paperwork, conflicting medical evaluations, and representatives who seemed more interested in closing cases than solving problems. It took me 2 phone calls to get Jim's file flagged for priority review, and 1 more to connect him with a VA advocate who specialized in his type of claim. Within a week, Jim had a hearing scheduled, and within a month, his disability rating had been increased from 30% to 70%, resulting in a significant increase in his monthly benefits. "How did you do that?" Jim asked when we met for coffee to celebrate his success. 20 years in the Army teaches you how the system works," I said. "And recent experience with federal law enforcement doesn't hurt either." Word spread quickly through the veteran community. We started getting referrals from the VA hospital, from veteran service organizations, and from satisfied clients who told their friends about the father and son team that actually got results. Tyler proved to be invaluable in ways I hadn't expected. His generation's comfort with technology allowed him to navigate online systems that baffled older veterans. And his recent experience as someone who'd made a serious mistake gave him credibility with clients who were dealing with their own problems. More importantly, working together had repaired something between us that I hadn't even realized was broken. The distance that had grown during Tyler's teenage years, the sense that we were living in the same house but different worlds, had been replaced by genuine partnership and mutual respect. 6 months after the Orlando arrests, Agent Martinez called to update us on the case. The scammer network had been completely dismantled, with arrests in 7 states and recovery of over $2 million in stolen benefits. David, the ringleader we'd met at the restaurant, had been sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. "None of this would have been possible without your cooperation," Martinez told us. "You should be proud of what you accomplished." After I hung up, Tyler looked at me with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think we would have figured out how to work together if this hadn't happened?" It was a good question. Before the scammer crisis, Tyler and I had been drifting apart, each of us dealing with our own problems in isolation. The forced cooperation of the investigation revealed capabilities and character traits that neither of us had known the other possessed. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I'm glad we found out this way instead of losing each other completely." Tyler nodded. "Me too, even though I hate that I had to screw up so badly first." "Sometimes you have to break something before you can fix it," I said. "The important thing is that we fixed it together." Our business continued to grow, and with it, Tyler's confidence and sense of purpose. He enrolled in college courses focused on public administration and veteran affairs, with the goal of eventually expanding our services to include policy advocacy and legislative support. But perhaps the most significant change was in our relationship. The distance and miscommunication that had characterized Tyler's teenage years had been replaced by open dialogue and genuine collaboration. We'd learned to see each other as complete people, Tyler as a capable young man rather than just my kid who needed protection. And me as someone with valuable skills and experience rather than just the dad who made the rules. One evening, as we were closing up our small office, we'd rented a space above a coffee shop downtown. Tyler looked up from the files he was organizing and said something that caught me completely off guard. "Dad, I need to tell you something about Marcus." I looked up from my laptop. We'd been so busy with the business that I'd almost forgotten about Tyler's drug debt, the original problem that had driven him to sell my information in the first place. "What about him?" Tyler's face was serious, but not scared the way it had been that morning in the kitchen 6 months ago. "I never paid him back. The money from the scammers, I spent most of it on other stuff before I realized what I'd gotten into. And after everything happened with the FBI, I was afraid to contact him." I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, the protective instinct that wanted to solve Tyler's problems for him. But I'd learned something over the past months about when to step in and when to let my son handle things himself. "What do you want to do about it?" "I want to pay him back, all of it, plus interest. I've been saving money from the business, and I think I have enough now." I nodded. "That's the right thing to do. But I'm scared," Tyler admitted. "What if he's angry? What if he thinks I was trying to rip him off?" "Then you explain what happened. You tell him the truth, you pay what you owe, and you move on. Sometimes the only way through fear is straight through it." Tyler spent the weekend trying to contact Marcus, finally reaching him through a mutual friend from high school. The meeting was tense but ultimately successful. Marcus was more relieved than angry, and he respected Tyler's decision to make things right, even though so much time had passed. "How do you feel?" I asked when Tyler came home that evening. "Lighter," he said without hesitation. "Like I can finally breathe all the way." I understood that feeling. There's a weight that comes with carrying secrets and unfinished business, and the relief of setting things right is profound. Tyler had learned something that had taken me years to understand, that avoiding problems only makes them heavier, while facing them head-on usually makes them smaller than they seemed. As our first year in business came to a close, we'd helped over 200 veterans navigate the benefit system with a success rate of over 90%. More importantly, we'd created something together that neither of us could have accomplished alone. Tyler had grown into the kind of young man I'd always hoped he'd become, responsible, compassionate, and driven by a sense of purpose that went beyond his own immediate needs. And I'd discovered that fatherhood didn't end when your child became an adult. It just evolved, something that could be even more rewarding if you were willing to adapt. The phone on my desk rang, and I glanced at the caller ID. It was a number I didn't recognize, but that didn't concern me anymore. We got calls from new clients every day, people who'd heard about our work and needed help with their own VA battles. "Williams Veteran Services," I answered. "This is Dave." "Williams? My name is Sarah Chen. I'm a veteran, and I'm having trouble with my disability claim. Someone at the VA hospital said you might be able to help." I grabbed a pen and started taking notes. Another veteran in need, another opportunity to make a difference. Tyler looked up from his computer and mouthed, "New client?" I nodded, and he pulled out his own notepad, ready to help coordinate whatever assistance Sarah might need. As I listened to her story, a familiar tale of bureaucratic confusion and administrative delays, I thought about the journey that had brought Tyler and me to this point. It had started with betrayal and fear, with a son's desperate mistake and a father's anger. But it had evolved into something neither of us could have imagined when that phone first rang at 6:47 on a Tuesday morning. We'd learned that trust, once broken, could be rebuilt stronger than before. We'd discovered that the skills we'd developed in our separate lives, my military experience and Tyler's technological fluency, could be combined in ways that created something greater than the sum of its parts. And we'd found a way to transform our worst crisis into our greatest opportunity. "We can definitely help you," I told Sarah Chen. "When can you come in to meet with us?" Tyler was already checking our calendar, ready to schedule the appointment. We were partners now in every sense of the word, working toward goals that mattered to both of us. The scammers who'd tried to exploit my service and my son's vulnerability had inadvertently given us the greatest gift possible. They'd forced us to become the team we always had the potential to be. After I hung up the phone, Tyler looked at me with a grin. "Busy day tomorrow?" "Every day's busy when you're doing work that matters," I replied. "Good," Tyler said. "I wouldn't want it any other way." I looked at my son, my partner, my colleague, my friend, and felt a satisfaction deeper than anything I'd experienced in my military career or my years in security work. We'd built something together that served others while strengthening the bond between us. The phone rang again. Another veteran in need, another chance to help, another day in the life we'd created from the ashes of crisis and betrayal. Tyler answered this time. "Williams Veteran Services, this is Tyler. How can we help you?" As he took down the caller's information, I thought about all the families out there who were dealing with their own versions of what we'd been through, the secrets, the mistakes, the failures of communication that could drive wedges between people who loved each other. We couldn't help all of them, but we could help some. And in helping others navigate their crises, we'd continue to strengthen the partnership that had emerged from ours. The sun was setting outside our office window, casting long shadows across the files and computers that represented hundreds of veterans we'd assisted. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new clients, new opportunities to make a difference. But tonight, Tyler and I would go home to the house where this all started, where a scared teenager had once spilled an energy drink on the kitchen floor and an angry father had demanded answers. We'd eat dinner together and talk about our day, about our plans, about the future we were building one case at a time. The crisis that had nearly torn us apart had instead taught us who we really were and who we could become together, and that knowledge would guide us through whatever challenges lay ahead. Tyler finished the call and looked at me. "Ready to head home, Dad?" "Ready," I said. We locked up the office and walked out into the Florida evening, father and son, partners in purpose, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring.